Okie dokie. Yay. So, last official lectures. I'm sure you're thrilled. Only one more week and you have your life back again, at least on Thursday nights, right? So, a couple things we just want to review. And then, of course, I'll say it at the end. And if anyone has more questions at the end, that's fine. We have to finish 8.3. We left off at like slide 36 or something like that from last week, so we could get the test done. We uh, should be working on our final paper, which is due next week. That's 7 interviews, 7 observations. Remember, one full page for the person you're interviewing at each of those age groups. Refer to your syllabus. All the directions are there. There's almost no way of getting it wrong other than just not doing what you need to do. Um, there's no citations, there's no anything because you're interviewing people or observing people of the different age groups, so there's nothing to cite. So it's make sure it's one full page typed, double space. It can be longer, can't be less, and you should start a new page with each person. And you'll send that to me next week. Next week, we just have the final exam. So that's it. It will be on 7.1 through death and dying. We're going to finish 8.3. We're going to do 9.3 and death and dying tonight. All
I
of
had a
those are
question.
filmed. Sure.
Would you be able to post like an example paper of like kind of what you're looking? No.
No, but I'll be
Okay.
glad to, right after class, if you want me to bounce some ideas off of you, I'll be glad to do that. But
Okay.
the syllabus gives you lots of options. Like I said, there's almost no way to get this wrong other than not following the criteria that it asked you on the syllabus. It doesn't need to have all that stuff. It just has to be at least one full page for each of the different age groups. But I'll be glad to give you some ideas. I don't like posting other people's observations or interviews of other people, at least when they're doing
Okay.
that interview for a class, they that person knows that it's just going to be for them to give to me. If I post it, then it becomes public, and I don't think that's fair of me to do that to the people who did the interviews or the observations. But I'll be glad to
Okay.
help you. Just stay on at the end, and I'll bounce some ideas.
Yes.
Any other questions? The test next week is, the essay questions are online. Don't send them early, please. They need to come in at the same time when you take the test, either two separate emails if you can't attach it, but definitely send them next week. Don't send them early because there's a greater chance than I won't remember you sent it early. So this way they're right then there. Because I have all your grades that I have to do. That means I have to read all your papers, all 30 papers. I have to grade all 30 exams and average all your grades before Monday morning. So everything needs to be there so I don't happen to, you know, give someone a grade that they don't deserve. Okay. Some people still owe me their toy review. As soon as I get everyone's toy review, I can average your class participation and activity grade. So it'll make it easier again on the last night. Because at the end, that last email you're going to get from me is going to be your test grade, it's going to be your paper grade, and it's going to be your final grade for the course.
Professor,
Yes.
I thought the toy thing was extra credit.
No, the
Oh,
game is extra credit.
it was extra. Okay.
The toy thing was an activity. The 10 toys you had to review. Yeah, it's the other thing that's on that paper to make a child's game. That's extra credit, which would, again, if you plan on doing that, it would have to be in before the final exam starts because I'm just going to be limited on time according to the registrar to get your grades done. So, I don't want to not give you credit and you send it later. If you do all that work to make the game, you want to get credit. So make sure you send it in before the final exam. This way, if everything in by the final exam, I can grade everything and get everything back to you by Sunday. And you'll know your grades for everything then. Any other questions?
I have.
Sure.
I was just wondering if you ever graded last week's exams.
Yes,
I never.
I sent the email this afternoon.
Oh, okay, I'll check.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I waited because I had some people that couldn't come early today, so they actually took the exam yesterday on Zoom. So I kind of just waited till I had everything together to send everyone's who took the exam. And people who took the exam today, I'll have that out to you before tonight. So I think I sent one of them already because I was able to grade it quickly before class. But yeah, most people did
Does the
very, very well.
trials game have to be like a board game, or can it be like a sports game?
It has to be a game that doesn't exist already. It would have to be something original. You would give directions. Board game
I have
is
an
a
idea
possibility.
of for a game, but it's kind of like tag, sort of.
Well, again, it can have components of tag, but it can't be tag.
Yeah,
So
right.
if you read through the example I give on that document for how to make a game, I think you'll get a better idea. And then again,
Okay.
if you have some questions, I'll be glad to answer that.
Okay.
Any other questions before we get started with finishing 8.3? And I am recording this. This will be our last one, of course. All of these are actually recorded already from previous classes. So 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, and death are all recorded already on YouTube. If for some reason you have to cut out or you miss part of it because you have to run to the bathroom, you can always jump back on. But I will post this video again by tomorrow, so you have our actual class one to observe. So let me get started here. Close that. And remember, I won't be able to see the chat while I'm in full screen down here, so get rid of this too. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. We were on, I think, 36, if memory serves me right. I think I stopped there because I thought it was going to be much longer than time we had. So, okay, so violence. So we're now in middle adulthood. Okay, spousal abuse is sad but true, very much an epidemic in the United States and around the world. In 1/4 of all marriages, there's some form of violence, and that violence is on a sliding scale. So it could be anything from psychological violence, physical violence, where simple things like hitting, slapping, to actually batter, throwing people down the steps, doing physical harm once, twice, three times, it doesn't matter because it's not acceptable at any time. More than half of all murdered women were murdered by their partner. 21 to 34% of women will be slapped or kicked, beaten, threatened, attacked, uh, just in general, or attacked actually with a weapon at least once, which is really frightening if you think about that. 15% of marriages have continuing severe violence, and it's not associated with any particular economic group, any particular race, any particular area. It can happen anywhere. And 1 in 7 men have been victims also of severe violence. So sometimes the person causing the violence can also be a woman. And again, the chart just kind of reiterates that, but you don't have to memorize the chart. There are some factors that we see in research, but again, it's not saying that only these people are going to commit abuse or be likely to receive abuse. So low socioeconomic status, a lot of times in a relationship, money's an issue, and it's one of the biggest reasons why people fight in a marriage. If you grew up in a violent home, that's that almost conditioning that you saw that, and you might then decide to continue that. Hey, it was okay for my family, I'm going to do it here too. Families that have more children tend to have more violence. Again, frustration sometimes, overworked parents, especially single parents. You're working, trying to deal with multiple children, uh, to throw on other situations that may be occurring. And then incest is actually more likely to occur in wealthy families than in low economic status families. There are different stages to spousal abuse. There's that tension stage when it just kind of first starts. And I believe I have my notes on this one underneath, in that little box. I think all of these have notes, so you would be able to just look there too. That's, it's just tension. Arguments are occurring. Battering actually happens where someone physically is harming the other individual. And then typically what we see very quickly, usually after the battering occurs, sometimes as soon as that same night or the next day, contrition. Oh, I'm so sorry I did this. I was angry. I had too much to drink. I'll never do it again. You bring you flowers or bring you candy or take you out to dinner, your favorite food, and it happens again and again. Because many times we see with the research is once you're abused, there's a good probability that they will abuse again. Some women feel that, well, maybe it was my fault. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have, pushed so hard. They give reasons on why they should stay. Well, there's the children, and what am I going to do? I don't have a job. Where am I going to go? He's so angry, or she's so angry, they might find me and track me, and then it'll be worse. Protections against abuse orders don't always work. A lot of times they don't work. They don't think there's any good alternative, and some stay just out of fear because they figure if they leave, if they get found, then they may do even worse harm to them, like kill them. And again, the cycle of violence. Abused and neglected of the children may lead to abuse of adults, but only 1/3 go on to abuse their children. So even though they were abused themselves or saw abuse in the home, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to abuse their children. 2/3 of abusers were not abused as children. So this just came up through psychological issues that may be going on, stress. They need some anger management, need some counseling, and it's more available to people. So many people stay more to themselves when there's violence going on in the home. Again, men or women come up with reasons why not to say anything. So there are roots in society, of course, and cultures. Some cultures believe women are inferior to men. They have to walk so many steps behind. They're not allowed to wear a certain dress out in public or even sometimes in the home. It was permitted for years and years and years that it was okay to hit women. And many times women were the target because they had low status, and sometimes if they have high status, people think of them as a threat, so they do harm to them because they figure that's the only way they can mitigate that threat. So what can we do to help victims? Number one, right there, teach them that violence is never acceptable. Make sure you tell your children, make sure everyone in your family knows that violence is never an acceptable behavior. Call the police. Understand that remorse shown by a spouse or a partner may not stop them from hurting you in the future. Victims should seek safe havens. There are places that they can go to. Anytime you feel you're in danger from a partner, you can seek a restraining order, but again, regrettably, they don't always work. Somebody's not outside your door making sure that they're nowhere around. And there is a domestic violence hotline that you can call that can give you some options for your area. So again, review, sample question. In the last section of 8.3, when we talk about work, work and careers, jobs at midlife. This is typically for most people the greatest time in your work career, most productive. Most people are successful. They're making the most money that they've ever made in their job. Many times they have administrative roles now or supervisor roles at this time, or at least they have a good fit, they believe, in their job. Sometimes that can be transformed. So many places nowadays, many companies, when they're looking to save money, may cut some jobs of the higher paying individuals and hire like two part-time people to do that job and save money. And now you have this person who's worked all their life for this company who's now looking for a job. Difficult at this age. So middle-aged workers care more about pay, working conditions, vacation. What are the perks to working for a particular company are important to people at this age? Are they satisfied? Now, I tell people this all the time. They don't always listen to me, but if you don't like your job, it doesn't matter how much money they're paying you. Psychologically, it's really hard to get up for that job. It's hard to do the job, to put your very best effort forward just for money. You may psychologically be better off taking a job that pays a little bit less money, but you enjoy going to work and what you do, and you feel satisfaction with your job. When you don't like your job, burnout can occur very quickly, and burnout is a place you don't want to be. You're dissatisfied, you're frustrated, you're tired, you're very cynical. You have had high hopes for this, and it's like all taken away. You can, of course, combat burnout, but it takes some effort, and sometimes people can't do it by themselves. Some companies actually have a counselor on staff through HR. Remember, HR is there as a reference, but HR many times is there for the benefit of the company. So they're looking out for what the company's interests are also, not only the employee's interest. So try to get yourself back motivated. You come up with a feasible goal, especially if you're overwhelmed with the amount of work you have to do. Sometimes you need to stop thinking about work. In other words, there's a work home life balance. And many larger companies actually talk about this. You need to disengage from your job. Now, sometimes you can't. It's just going to follow you. But you try to leave, when you leave the office, when you leave your job and come home, then it's home and do things for yourself and take care of yourself. People who work from home have a hard time doing that sometimes because you're right there. And sometimes it can be a real struggle, not only to motivate yourself to do your job because other things are going on in your house, but to keep yourself separated between the two. A lot of people who do have a separate room for their office, and once they're done for the day, they close the door to that office and don't go back in until the next day. Unemployment does happen. It can have a big psychological impact, not only economic impact, money, but it can really play mind games with you. It can keep people feeling anxious and depressed and irritable, and it takes a longer time, again, as you're older, to be reemployed. Many companies, if they're investing in a new worker, would rather have a younger worker because they're going to possibly be with the company longer. Not necessarily, but, it's like we're going to spend a year training you and you're going to retire in 10 years versus we're spending a year training you and you're going to be with the company for 35 years. They're going to go with the person who's younger, that they're going to get more out of year-wise for the company. So yes, employers may discriminate because of age. They're not supposed to, but they do. Older workers many times are much more reliable and hardworking, and I'll tell you, older workers show up. Younger workers don't always, especially if it's a person's first job or, a new hire that really isn't engaged with the company yet, tends to not show up as much or call off more. Some people do switch careers mid life. Sometimes they do it voluntarily. Sometimes they don't have a choice because they were laid off. If they didn't have any satisfaction with the old job, it's a lot easier than to start out new if you can find a new job. I always suggest don't quitting your first job until you have your second job that you can fall back on, or at least if you know you have money stashed away that you can support yourself and your family until you get another job, or if you have a partner or a spouse who's working, who's able to help supply income to the family so you don't have the stress because of money. Many women do return to the job market much more than 40 years ago, and many work through raising their children. Immigrants, again, some people have a lot of criticisms, but there are many, many people who are doing jobs that other people don't want to do, and we need those jobs covered. So most immigrants actually have, a lot of skills that need maybe nurtured a little bit. Some are very well financially. Only a few actually are on welfare. And believe it or not, they contribute more to the economy than people give them credit for. And again, you don't have to memorize the chart. Most people have 28 hours of leisure time a week. Not always. Believe me, I work 3 jobs. I don't have 28 hours of leisure. I do in the summer. No, not as much during the school year. They spend a lot of time watching TV or socializing, maybe participating in sports or things that are going on in the community, sometimes volunteering, sometimes helping a neighbor or helping their children or their parents. And sometimes here, life is pretty fast paced, where in other countries it's not so much. Review, review, sample question, sample short answer question. And close this out. So that ends 8.3. Pop back on. Anybody have any questions on 8.3? Okay. So 9.1 and 9.2 are on your own, either by uh, looking at the PowerPoints or actually watching the videos that are on YouTube. Let's pop to 9.3. And I always picked usually the 0.3 one because it's usually the longest one and it's the harder to get through, and it has more of a tie to the psychological aspect of the person. So this is going to be 8.3. I know you're all excited for the last lecture, which is death and dying, right? That's when everyone kind of looks like deer in headlights by the time I get done with the lecture. Okay, so we're now in late adulthood, and I hate to say it, but this is me. I'm I'm finally in this age group, and it's funny because I've been teaching this for, oh my gosh, 25 years. And as you go through the different age groups, you see, okay, I do that. Oh yeah, I do that. And every time I go through this part of the lecture, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me. Oh my gosh, that's me. So it really has a lot of personal aspects to it. All of you are very young, so none of you are in this age group. So this is new stuff that you get to look forward to. But maybe your parents may be going through this, or your grandparents, depending on your age. So Erickson's final stage out of the 8 stages is integrity versus despair. It's a time where we actually look back on our life and try to come to terms with it. Are we happy with our life? And if we are, even if we made some mistakes or, there were some rough patches along the way, when you look back in general, you feel like you did what you needed to do and you feel comfortable. So we say that's integrity. You feel fulfilled. You did the best that you could do. If you look back on your life and you're dissatisfied or unhappy, or, we say this is despair. People get very angry. They know they can't change what they did. You can't go back and change all the mistakes you might have made, or things that have occurred to you and you felt that you were wronged. But your life still goes on, but you tend to be grumpy old men or women. Uh, you're very cynical, very stressed a lot of times, especially over money at this time period. As you are going through this stage, uh, figuring out, your person as a worker, and now many people are going to be retired. So who are you without your job? That was so much a part of you. Your body changes. Uh, to your surprise, you could be the healthiest person in the world. You ate right, you did exercises, you did everything you're supposed to do, and you still end up with cancer. Can be very difficult. And how do we deal with who we are, our ego? Um, how do we get above uh, all the things that can happen to us in late adulthood and get beyond that preoccupation with ourselves? Because we are going to look at ourselves as we get older. So when we talked about Livingston, we did the spring, summer, fall. So this is the winter of life, the final season. The transition time is between 60 and 65 when people start to say, hey, I am getting older. And in our society, because people are living longer, people have pushed back old. I want you to think about this, where you're at in your life. I can remember, when I was in college thinking, oh my gosh, 50, so old. Yeah, I'm 67. 67 isn't old. It really isn't when you think how much longer people are living, but it's a society thing too. What does society consider old? So 60 to 65 is that transition time, and people do struggle with it when you start getting those gray hairs. I started the class saying, "Hey, I got all my gray hair colored." I do that 4 times a year. I try to stall it as long as I can, but there gets a point when you look in the mirror and go, okay, I got to get this done because I can't stand the gray. There's nothing wrong with gray, but it's something that we've kind of grown up into our culture that you need to look a certain way or feel a certain play. Some people feel they lose power or respect or authority, especially in individualistic societies like the United States. Um, but there are so many good things that we can do at this age. We can serve as advisors or teachers to those younger than us. And, once you retire, it brings a lot of freedom. You can do what you want to do. You can, maybe before you were working 12-hour shifts and you couldn't go out and play golf, or you, couldn't join a group that you wanted to get involved in, or work with animals, or you couldn't do that because you just didn't have the time. So as we go through aging, there are different theories, again, of how we cope. And I think I have this broken down also in the notes too. The different personality types, we talked about Holland's personality type before. Um, you know, how are we composed as a person at this age? Sometimes we're passive, sometimes we're dependent on others. We can also defend ourselves. This is who we are, and we're not going to change. And some people have integrated personalities that they're able to integrate who they are with their life, not only their job, but their family and everything that they want to do in their communities. So it's not unusual, as I said, people to have a life review. And we see that in most of the research for this time period, not only Erickson, but Peck, Newgarden, Livingston, okay. Robert Butler is a new one that we haven't talked about it at all. Uh, he says that this life review doesn't really happen until people are aware that they might die. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be diagnosed with cancer, but as you get older and the body doesn't function the same way it did, you may go, oh, wow, I used to be able to do that. I can't walk 5 miles anymore. I can only walk one. Oh, I breathe harder as I'm walking up the steps. Aches and pains when you wake up in the morning, things like that. He says those things can make us much more aware of impending death. Also, when some of your friends start dying. So, you see in the obituary someone you grew up with, who went to high school with you, passed away. So things like that can jog that, wow, I'm getting up there, I'm getting older. And so it's part culture, part personality on where you're at in your life. So are there some benefits to a life review? Oh, sure, always. At any time in your life, you don't necessarily have to wait till you're old to, look back on your life. If there's some issues that you're having, you can help deal with those issues. Share with others who are your same age that might be going through the same problems. So it's not only you that, has aching knees and a bad back and, get tired a little earlier or fall asleep on the couch, things like that. And just looking back at your life can help improve your memory. Because that's one of the things that can possibly happen as you get older. Your memory doesn't get as focused as it used to be. Um, what are the actual cost of doing a life review? Well, just realizing that, you're not as good physically or even psychologically and mentally as you were when you were 21, where you were at your peak. And sometimes when you look back at your life, if your life wasn't all a bed of roses, it can also lead to depression and guilt and anger. So, especially in our society, the older you get here in, Western culture, power and prestige is not as important as it is in like Eastern cultures. Many people feel once you get older, you are just quote unquote old. Okay. And sometimes you feel unimportant, you feel left out. If you're not up with the technology that's going on now, that doesn't mean people like my age and older don't know how to use technology. But younger people tend to pick up on it a little faster because they might be using it every single day. It may take someone who's a little older a little longer. I always laugh when I see those commercials for consumer cellular on TV, and they're showing this flip phone with the big buttons for people that are older. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there are people that are still using flip phones because they don't want to be bothered with the newer technology. This is all they need. It's nice and easy for them to do, especially if they have cataracts and they need bigger buttons. People are losing their hearing. They have devices now that will transcribe what the person's saying. So if your hearing isn't that great, as you're listening on your home phone that has a cord, and it's actually attached to your house, it literally prints out, a transcript of what the person says. So you don't have to keep saying, what did you say? What time did you say we were going to meet? So technology has come a long way, but it also changes very, very quickly. And even people younger know that it changes very quickly. In other societies, Eastern culture, elderly are viewed much more positively. So, a lot of things associated with being old is wisdom. So, what's the difference between wisdom and intelligence? Well,
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, that was a question. Wisdom is experience, where intelligence is just learned.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Think in your mind, you don't have to say it out loud. Are there people in your life that you consider wise, especially if they're older individuals? In Eastern culture, as I said, people who are older are revered because of their knowledge and their experience. And many times, younger people seek out these people to ask their advice and listen to what they've gone through. Many times in Western culture, people are thought of as, oh, that's an old idea. They won't understand. They didn't do this and they don't know what's going on. But wisdom is something that's more timeless. It's something that people earn as they grow through life. And, intelligence is a form of, crystallized intelligence would be knowledge based. Fluid intelligence, of course, is problem solving. But a lot of times people want answers immediately, and wisdom doesn't come immediately. Wisdom is developed. So it's really difficult to put like a single definition. Like if you went to the dictionary and looked up the word wisdom, there's quite a few definitions for the word wisdom, and they don't necessarily all mean the same thing. So I'm not going to make you define wisdom, for the test, but understand there is a difference between wisdom and intelligence. Disengagement theory. So as people get older, it's something that will be a slow, gradual retreat. That tends to be psychologically the best way to do this. You tend to back away from your life just a little bit more. So, a lot of people, once they are done with their job, they, or have retired, have a real struggle dealing with what to do with all this time. And some people actually go back to work in another career because they just can't separate themselves from that. But if you do it gradually, uh, it's not as punishing, per se, to think of another word, of the psychological person. Gives people a little bit of time to reflect on what's important to you and to back away from maybe some of the stuff that isn't less important. Um, you decide what you accept as your social role, and it gives you a chance to be with those that meet your needs and them for you. And it's not automatic. It's not universal. Some people who are in their 80s that are still working, still uh, contributing a lot to society, not only through just basic wisdom, but they're actually running companies and continuing to do what they did all their lives.
That's my grandparents.
Uh,
My pap, he's retired and he
uh-huh.
cuts everybody's grasses. He's always doing stuff, fixing up the parks. Like, that man is so busy. It's crazy. And then my grandma, she's still a hairdresser. And like, she's got such bad arthritis that her hands literally take the shape of scissors, but she's still going. Like, she's just insane.
That's awesome. That really is, and if they need to, you got to think this, if they would get ill, they might need a little more help pulling back because they've been doing it so much longer and it has become so much a part of who they are. It can be hard to pull back, but God bless them, if they're that age and they're still working out there. People always say for me, like, when are you going to retire? It's like, well, technically I could retire right now, but I like what I'm doing. I like all my jobs. I don't mind getting, maybe on a snowy day when it's icy out, I grind and, make noises like, oh, why don't we have a 2 hour delay? But, as long as you still continue to be able to do your job and you're still contributing and engaging in situations, and, why not go for it? People are like, oh, you should retire. Well, what am I going to do? Even I laugh with summer. This summer, I actually have more time because I'm only teaching 3 classes instead of 4. I actually turned one down. Um, I thought, I can give myself a break. So it was just an ease of a little bit less of summer, but I actually have more time and I still have not done anything I said I was going to do because I'm just enjoying doing nothing other than my schoolwork that I have to do. But the garage still needs cleaned out and the cellar needs cleaned out. And yeah, I'll get around to it eventually. But, just because you have more time, you still engage in other ways too. So I'm the first one to agree with your older relatives, and God bless them again. Hopefully they continue to move on and continue to do that. And for all the rest of you too, for your relatives also. So, being continually involved, yeah, a lot of successful aging, the research shows, as long as you're doing something that you like to do, some sort of activity, social interactions, find things other than jobs, to do. Find some replacement activity. Hey, enjoy time with the grandchildren. Work at the food bank. Do something for your church or for your community. Volunteer at the animal shelter, maybe adopt a pet. You know, those things can help you as you slow down your work schedule. So the continuity theory is again, people just maintain their desired level of involvement. That helps you to maintain your well-being and your self-esteem. Uh, Things that can affect this, again, as long as you have good physical health and good mental health, financial security and a sense of autonomy is really great. A lot of people, once they leave their job, if they didn't prepare like a retirement account, it can be difficult financially for people once they leave work and trying to live on Social Security and maybe a small retirement that they may have put aside. Some people didn't start when they were 21 putting money aside for the retirement because at 21 it's like, oh, that's so far away, I won't need it. But actually, if you do put it away early, you'll have more than enough money. By the time you get to retirement, you might even get to retire early. Again, different views on successful aging. Um, as long as you are still engaged in some way, change some things, you're still having success in your life in the point that you feel like you're doing something and striving and still keeping who you are in balance, you'll be fine. Sample question, sample question. Next section. How about living at home? Only 5% of elderly end up living in a nursing home. So not everyone ends up in a nursing home. Many times it's because of some sort of physical limitation that's going on. 2/3 of people over 65 actually will live with a family member. Typically, it's one family member who steps up to take care of an elderly parent or an elderly aunt or uncle. Most of the times it's a spouse, but depends if the spouse is physically able to do that or if they're um, still married. They may have separated or divorced. Some spouses will come back and take care of their spouse, even though they are separated or divorced. It can be hard living with your kids because you still think of them as kids, but they're adults and they have children of their own. We do see in the African American community more of a multi-generational setting, so we do see grandparents and sometimes great grandparents living in the family home. Uh, there are community daycare centers that are out there that are kind of like adult daycare, instead of childcare. They have adult daycare. They do different activities that people can get involved with. Um, you drop them off, make sure they make sure that they're fed, that they get their meds, they have some sort of activity. And that can be, an outpatient type thing. Inpatient type thing would be more adult daycare where you're in a nursing facility or you're there because of possibly rehab. About 4.5% to 5% over the age of 65 might be in some sort of nursing institution because of physical issues that are going on, medical issues. And about 10% of those over the age of 85 are in those situations. Sometimes when you're in those situations, learned helplessness can form. In other words, you feel like you no longer have control. And this is why many older adults fight to keep their home. They don't want to leave. They don't want to move out because their home is their independence. But when they get to that point that they forgot they left the stove on and they almost burnt the house down and possibly they themselves with it, that's when children and adults need to do some communicating. Um, a lot of times when you're talking about nursing homes, people working nursing homes are busting their tails. They're understaffed. They don't get paid very well. And, they can be very, very expensive, very, very expensive nursing homes. I always tell people who are at that point that a loved one has to go into a nursing home, please go to visit these nursing homes, just like with child care facilities. Go to visit, make an appointment, go and visit, and then just show up one day to see if there's any difference from what they presented and what actually is going on. So sometimes apathy, lack of caring, and sometimes it's just they're overworked. And, when you have 2 or 3 people on staff and you have 35 people you have to care for, it can be very hard. If the person believes that they don't have any control over their environment, that they have to go out to the great room to watch TV, they have to eat meals with everyone, they can't just eat it in their room, things like that can cause some issues. Again, economics, 10% of our elderly live below the poverty line, women twice as likely to live in poverty as men. 25% of women living alone live below the poverty line. This is all kind of scary if you are reading this with me. 8% of whites live below the poverty line, 19% of Hispanics below, and 24% of African Americans below the poverty line. You're on a fixed income, Social Security. If you're lucky, you might get a 1% raise or 2% raise on Social Security. If you have a pension, if you had a good pension and you were able to maybe match money put into your pension, like the company put in 200 every pay and you matched it with 200, you might have a decent pension if you started early enough. If you did like a Roth IRA or an IRA in general, or if you have savings that you that have compounded some interest, or you invested in, mutual funds or the stock market or that. As you get closer to retirement age, you might get a little more careful and not go through those volatile stocks because you don't want to lose so much of your income that you might need for later years. Healthcare is skyrocketing. Many spend 20% or more of their income on healthcare. Nursing homes can cost 80,000 plus a year. And there are only certain facilities that take openings for people on Medicare and Medicaid. So you may not be getting into a facility that you would like to go to because it would only be partially covered. Again, decision, when to retire. Some struggle with this. Some are happy about this because now you might have a life of leisure. I always mention myself, I'm at that age that I could retire. And a friend of mine who was a school teacher, he joined Central at the same time and he chose to retire this year. And he's thrilled about it. He still has another job, but he's thrilled that he was retiring. But as it came towards the end of the school year, he was almost regretting the decision because he enjoyed what he did for so much. But I'm trying to hang in there till I'm 70, so a couple more years, assuming physically that I'm fine. But yeah, it is a decision you have to make, especially when you know someone who's your age who's taking retirement. And yes, there are laws against age discrimination, but yep, they're still out there and they're still doing it, and they find ways around that. Mandatory retirement is illegal except for public safety, and believe it or not, clergy. Clergy have to retire at 75. They can still do some work, but they typically retire at that point. If there's less work and more employees, sometimes companies will offer you a package deal to retire where they'll give you so much extra, they'll offer you health care for so long, and it's a good move, and you decide, okay, I'm going to take it. So you're tired, you're retired. Why do you retire? Burnt out, your job's stressful, and you're getting older and you don't want to deal with it anymore. Your health may be declining. You got that incentive to retire early. And maybe you've always wanted to see your family and do things with your family or travel, and you never had the opportunity to do that. So there are different stages of retirement. Pretty straightforward. And again, I have this in my notes too, the definitions. The honeymoon stage, when you first retire, hey, it's great. You can sleep in, you can do what you want the entire day. You can go anywhere. You don't have to worry about the job. It's a rainy, miserable, stormy day, and you can just stay in bed and do whatever you want. Great. It doesn't stay that way. According to research shows that there's a period that it kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of bored. Oh, this used to be more fun. I don't know what to do. And, even more arguments can happen, with you and your partner because you're now home all the time. And you may not have been home all the time before, but now you're there all the time. So there can be some disenchantment, reorientation, finding other things to do. What can you do with your time? And even, again, pick up a part-time job. Do something for the family. Do something for the community. If you like animals, go to the animal rescue. They take volunteers, walk the dogs, help in their gift shop, different things like that you can do. Find a routine, something you always do. My dad was one of those people who had worked all his life. And when he retired, he was fine at first, he cut the grass, helped in the garden, but he was bored and he didn't know what to do with himself and being home all the time. My mother would like send him out. So he had a routine. He would go to the store every day and he would do the shopping, whatever we needed that day. Then he would go to the beer garden and get one beer and then catch the bus and come home. 2 days a week, he did some sort of activity. He did ceramics and did macrame. And he was the only man in those classes, but it gave him something to do. And he felt like he was doing something. And he made all these great things that he made for us and he made for the neighbors and he made for the family. Um, but it gave him a routine. And then the weekend was his time, his family time. He stayed home and did things. But it got him still being active when work was gone. And again, not everyone passes through all the stages, and it's not necessarily universal that this is going to happen. So it's a pattern that we see. So what's a good retirement? Well, first, you need to plan ahead financially, or you're going to be going back to work. Taper off gradually. I gave the example. I had the opportunity to teach 4 classes this summer. I said 3 was enough. So I only did 3. So that gave me a little more free time. Explore interest before you retire. Try some things, on the time off that you may have while you're still working. Are you married or in a long-term partnership? Discuss it with your partner. Don't just do it on your own. That's the person you're living with. They should have some say in what's going on, or at least for you to listen to what they would like to contribute. Where are you going to live? Don't always live too close to your kids or grandkids because you might become the daily babysitter. Not that you don't love your grandkids, but it can become every single day you're, older and you're running around after a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. Can get frustrating and challenging. And find a way to volunteer your time. And that last section that we're going to be doing for this, more men and women over 65 are married. 70% of women will outlive their husbands. The age for death is much closer than it used to be. It used to be women lived 6 to 8 years longer, but it's much closer in age now. People can remarry. It's easy. And a lot of times for male elderly men, it is easier to remarry. It gives you that opportunity to still have companionship, emotional support. And yeah, even in this age, sex is still available and is part of good relationships. You may find that you have to, talk to that person before you retire because, again, stress can affect a marriage. It's going to have some impact if you decide to retire. So please speak to your significant other before you retire. Divorce, 12% of divorces involve women over 66. The husband may have been abusive or an alcoholic. Many times the husband has found a younger woman, and even though you've been married 25 years, they will want a divorce because they found somebody younger. Again, psychological issues on retirement. Divorce seems to be harder on women than men because, again, not all women were in the workforce. Sometimes women have the psychological issue that they feel like they failed, and sometimes their quality of life may decrease because of loss of some of that income and that companionship. And seeking a new relationship, friends, it doesn't necessarily have to be a significant other like a spouse, but seeking new relationships can help get through this. About 5% of elderly never marry again. They'll say that they met the love of their life and they don't even look for anyone else. And, too much togetherness can be tough on a relationship. Again, you're going to be spending more time with them. Gives you an opportunity to do things together, share the responsibilities of the house. You can enjoy each other's company. You can even make it almost like a game. Who and what are we going to do today in order to get through this day as it's fulfilling for both of the people in the relationship. And caring for an aging spouse. Health means if somebody is sick, somebody's going to take care of the other person. And knowing that, the till death do you part, sickness and health. Yes, some people don't want to follow through with that, but many do. It can provide closeness, love, show you love and devotion to them. It can get frustrating. It can be hard. It can be difficult, especially if the other individual who's taking care of you is ill, but they're the least ill of the two of you. So they will continue to take care of you. 75% of the time, the wife is the caregiver, but not always. Death of a spouse or a partner, it's very painful. And depending whether you're married 2 years or 70 years, it's going to be difficult. The longer, of course, it's much more profound grief, and you don't have the person with you anymore. They're not there to share your life, and this is when friends can be very, very, very helpful and supportive to that family member. Trying to get used to being a widow, preparation, it's coming. Death is inevitable. So when it happens, just being prepared for this. Grief and mourning can last months or years, and we'll talk about that more when we do the section after the break on death and dying. And eventually, many people adapt, some do not. And sometimes grief is so complicated that they never get over the grief. Friendships do matter. Friendships many times are more valued than family. These are people that you chose to be friends with, and they've chose to be friends with you. Friends can be more flexible than family. Family can be very stubborn. When a spouse dies, friends can help fill the gap. You don't need lots of friends. You don't need 12 friends. You need a couple good friends, you know. And even if it's not your spouse who dies, if one of your good friends dies that you were very close to, it's almost the same reaction you have as a spouse. They're not there anymore. They're not your confidant. They're not your social support. They're not there to pick you up and help you. You're now grieving because of their loss. So friends do provide social support. It can help with successful aging, gives them someone to hear what they have to say. And of course, they can sympathize because they've had the same experience because they're around your age. They can be, support, not only psychological, but they can be physical support, they can be material support. Reciprocity in a friendship. That's the I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine mentality. I'll be there for you if you're there for me. And again, the chart you don't have to memorize, but it gives you an idea of what people do and later adulthood. Volunteer work, travel, uh, not necessarily working. You may have respect in a community or family. And when we talk about extended family, siblings are more important because you shared experience, but maybe you're an only child or one of your siblings has passed, so you're the only one left in the group as siblings. When we talk about taking care of others, many times it will fall on a brother or sister, but more often we see it's children who will actually take on that role. And a lot of times, you know, your children become your parent. They become the parent to you as an older person, helping you to make decisions. Many parents and children do stay close together all the way through the age. And you have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and not all grandparents are equally involved. We see more grandmothers than grandfathers getting involved. We see more African American grandparents more involved than white grandparents. Um, just because you're a grandparent doesn't mean that you have this close connection with your grandchildren, especially if you live far away. You may never see them. You may see them online on FaceTime, but you don't really get to see them. But there's a lot of support for great grandparents and grandparents interacting with younger children. More scary stuff. Elder abuse. 11% of our elderly are abused, either psychologically or physically maltreated, or neglect of elderly. I don't know if you've ever heard of, and I'm going to hop off on this one. Uh, I don't know if you've ever heard of granny dumping. It's a real thing. When children of the person is, they just kind of are at their wits' end and they don't know what to do anymore and they don't want to do it anymore. So they take their elderly mom or dad or aunt, whoever, uncle, whoever they're taking care of, they take away all their ID and they take them to a hospital and kind of just drop them off outside. And yes, this really happens. And the person's alone. Especially if they have dementia or Alzheimer's, and people just give up. They don't want to do it anymore. And here's this older individual who loved these people and took care of them all their life, and all of a sudden, their children don't want to take care of them anymore, and they just drop them off. Sad. The first time I heard about it, I was just appalled that some people do that. I can understand psychologically why some people do that, but is it the right thing to do? Heck no. But do people do it? Yep.
Yeah, that's really sad.
It is. It really
Yeah.
is. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just one thing I actually want to work in like a nursing home because I'm in the physical therapist assistant program here at at Boyce Campus, CCAC, and
Mhm.
I definitely want to work with the elderly. That's a big part of our, physical therapy who we work with. And I just remember my grandpa, and this isn't the same thing, but my grandma had cancer and she was fighting it for years, and then she got to a point where she couldn't take care of my grandpa anymore, and
Sure.
he had Alzheimer's, and he was just getting worse and worse. And so they made the decision to put him in, one of those nursing
Facility.
homes.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it was really sad because, we went to visit him and you could just tell he was just devastated getting put in there. He was like, when am I going home? And my dad was like, you can't go home, Dad. You got to stay here. And, you could just see the devastation on his face, like looking back, it's really sad, and, I mean, my dad was working full time at the time. I don't think he could have, it would have been hard, I guess, for him to take him in. But, I don't think I could, put my dad, in a facility like that. I wouldn't feel right doing it, So,
When I was in charge of a youth group for our church, uh, 3 times a year we would go to one of the nursing homes, and we would spend time. The students would gather gifts, like food, like hand lotion and, a brush or a comb or tissues and, just little things. And then usually something personal. We always tried to find out ahead of time from the nursing staff, what this person likes to do crossword puzzles. Okay, so we'd put a crossword puzzle, and then they would deliver these gifts. And, it would be right around the holidays, and the students, they were high school students, so they would engage with the older individuals. And it just brought such joy to them. But we met some people who it's not like they didn't have any family, but their family never came. Never. Not even on holidays, just never showed up. And it was so sad. And I still remember this one woman, when she got her gift, she just like bust out crying. It was so emotional for the kids and even for me. She's like, this is the first gift I've ever got since I've been in the nursing home. And she was in like for 3 years. And it was just so sad to know that, and she had a family. I personally wanted to go find this family and say, get your ass over there, but I mean, you can't do that because you don't know what the situation is. But there was
Yeah, I
so
can
many.
say I've worked at quite a few nursing homes, and a
Hmm.
lot of the times it's the companies that make it very difficult for families to come in, because of other residents or patients, especially with COVID and after
Oh
COVID.
yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely with that.
Yeah, and honestly, the companies are the biggest problems about nursing homes.
Yeah, I can remember when I had my knee replacement because I'm single and I wouldn't have been able to go home and take care of myself. So I went into an assisted facility. It was part nursing, part rehab. And I was the youngest person in the entire facility. This is, like 12, 13 years ago. So I was the youngest person there. And, I was in my little wheelchair until they got me up and walking and everything. But, to listen to the stories of these people, because I was young, I'm like, what am I going to do? Yeah, I watched the Olympics on the TV, but I wanted to get out and talk to these people. People would bring their dogs and they did dog therapy. There were these two beautiful Akitas that the one staff member had, and they would come around and greet all the patients and everything. But it really gave me like a personal view, like, wow, this is not something I would want to be in, you know, for the rest of my life. It was great to communicate with that, but
Yeah.
it was
They
hard.
also don't staff them properly either.
Correct. Yeah, they did not have enough staff to deal. And again, because I was semi-mobile, there were times that I was pushing somebody in a wheelchair while I was still just barely walking, But it really opened my eyes. I saw it when my mom was in a nursing facility when um, she had to have a feeding tube and everything. But I saw that because I would go every day, and I always told people go often because one, I wanted to be there, but you want to check up on the facility because they don't necessarily have enough people to do the job that they need to do. It's not that the people don't want to do the job, they're one person, and they have all these people they have to try to take care of. So, yeah, thank you for sharing, everyone. That was awesome. Okay, let's finish this last slide and then we'll take our break. Okay, so again, if you suspect abuse, whether they're in a facility or if they're at home, please contact the authorities to make sure. Do a welfare check. Police will do a welfare check if you suspect there's problems when they're at home. And again, sample question. So let's take a break. We are down to one PowerPoint, and that's the one on death and dying. So I have 12 minutes too. So how about if we start back at 7 o'clock? And then once we're done with that PowerPoint, I'll again just go over everything that we need to know for next week. And then you're done for the night. But let's take a 12-minute break. I'll see you in 12 minutes. So we are down to the last lecture. Probably all going, oh, I'm so sick of listening to her. You have to feel accomplished here because you've covered like what, 27 lectures in 5 weeks? That's pretty good. So give yourself that pat on the back. Yeah, you deserve it for that. It's hard doing this course in a 6-week class, which is really 5 weeks because the final is the last week. So let me share my screen. It's also one of our shortest lectures on death. Nobody ever wants to talk about death. Like I said, everyone's always like, oh, but it's part of life. So, so there are different definitions that go with death, depending on the type of death we're talking about. Ones you should be familiar with would be like functional death, which would be like the absence of a heartbeat or breathing, or someone who is brain dead. So there's no brain activity, no electrical brain waves, etc. There are legal definitions. Your book lists all these different definitions for death. You should be familiar with these two. How do we react to death as we age? So, death in infancy and childhood, we're going to talk about conceptions of death. How about in adolescence? How do we look at death as a young adult? How do we look at death in middle adulthood or death in late adulthood? And we're looking at it in two components. Not only if you are that age and somebody dies, but also if somebody that age dies. Okay. So let's talk about death in infancy and childhood. A miscarriage, you've heard that term before. We kind of mentioned it way, way, way back, and it would have been like lecture number 2 or 3. When pregnancy ends because of whatever reason, the child is unable to survive outside the mother's womb, so we have a miscarriage. Uh, Sudden infant death syndrome, we talked about before also. That's the unexplained death of a healthy baby. You didn't know anything was wrong. Just one morning you wake up and your baby's dead. This usually occurs within the first year. Accidents, we talked about this before when we talked about that age group, tend to be one of the most frequent causes of death during childhood. And when we talk about children in the US who are victims of homicides, that has tripled in number since the 1960s. Childhood concepts of death, there is no concept of death until around the age of 5. They just don't understand death. Please, whatever you do, if if you have a child under the age of 5, don't say grandma's just sleeping. Oh my goodness, that is like the worst thing you can do because it can cause them to have a phobia for sleep, or they're afraid that when their parents and their loved ones go to bed that they may not get up and they may be dead, or if they go to bed they might not wake up and they'd be dead. So please don't ever use that analogy that that a loved one is just sleeping after they've died. When they get to the age of 5, they have a better understanding that death is final. It's not reversible. Remember, prior to that, it's still fantasy. They watch things, a cartoon on TV, and somebody gets killed. And in the next episode, they're back again, or even into later on, like into some video games that they may see or something they may see online. By the age of 9, they have good understanding that death is final. People are not coming back. Okay. By middle childhood, they even understand some of the customs involved with death. So, like funerals or cremations or cemeteries and what you do at those funerals, or, if somebody's been cremated with the ashes, or cemeteries, visiting the grave, etc. When we talk about death in adolescence, when we talk about a young person who has died, people can't deal with it many times because they think it's so unrealistic. These people, they're they're children, they're teens. They haven't lived their life yet. And the view of death in general, even for a person that age, at adolescent age, especially if it's a younger person, really they can't even comprehend how this person is dying. If you remember Personal Fable, we talked about and was just on the previous test that we took, but they don't think they're going to die. They're invincible. They're going to live forever. They're young, or at least live till they're really, really old. And so they try things that are a little more risk-taking behaviors. Terminal illness that can occur. You find out that a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old has cancer or has a brain tumor, etc. If you ever watch TV sometimes at night, you see the Shriners hospitals and St. Jude hospitals, treating children with cancer. And, boy, they really give you some of those tearjerker images and the stories of the families that are going through that. But adolescents just, they don't, they don't think that that should happen. And adolescents themselves being uh, terminally ill can be a real jaw-dropping experience for all their loved ones. They can go into depression. The whole family can be in depression, but they can really go into depression over, their life is possibly going to end. Death in young adulthood, people have a hard time with this. It's the prime of your life. This is the best time. You have the most energy. You have most opportunities. It just seems unthinkable that somebody at this age is going to die, and somebody does. And it can create anger and impatience and feelings of depression and regret and like, oh my gosh, the last thing I said to them was something bad. We had an argument or things like that. Middle adulthood, which we just finished when we did the top portion of the lecture. It's not as surprising that somebody might have a life-threatening disease, if they get cancer or heart disease or diabetes or something. But it is the time where people at this age fear death the most. You would think it would be as they get older, but no, it's actually middle age because of so many things that may be changing. Heart attack and stroke are the most frequent causes of death for people in middle adulthood. And late adulthood, this is the section we just did, the nines. Death is imminent. We all will die. We will. We don't know when, but we will. It's a question to think for yourself. Would you want to know when you will die? Some people say yes, because they could make plans and live their life to the fullest. And some people say no, they don't want to know because they believe it would change who they are. So as you get older, more people are going to die because they're of that age. You tend to be less anxious about dying because it's coming. It's going to happen. It's not like you're 12, and have your whole life in front of you. You've lived your life. Not everyone wants to know. A lot of people won't go to the doctor because they don't want to know that they have cancer. They don't want to know that they have heart disease. They would rather just live their life, and if one day they just don't wake up, they don't wake up. We have what's called terminal decline, and it's kind of a genetic theory that our genes are programmed to live to a certain age genetically. And once we hit that terminal decline, things slowly happen. And many people, once they hit that terminal decline, will be dead within 5 years. There are people who study death and dying. You might think of that as like, oh, I don't know if I could do that every day. But again, death is a part of life, so we have to talk about death. We talk about dying and grief. Sometimes you have to do crisis intervention when it happens. So if a person in a school commits suicide, you would bring in counselors to help students and the teachers and the parents deal with the death of that person. It's actually in some classes, they actually teach it during like a health class. They'll talk about death education. And it's also important to help people who are working, especially with the elderly or people who are doing hospice, that they have uh, education seminars, have counselors available to them, especially again, people who work with the elderly who may be exposed to death, nursing staff, aides, people who work in the hospitals, especially those who are working in intensive care. They may need additional support and help to deal with their daily job. So there are different steps, and depending on which researcher you're looking at, there is some agreement and some disagreement. We're going to talk about, what a DNR is, and we're also going to talk about people who are terminally ill and their choice of where to die. So the most famous researcher on death and dying, and that was actually the name of her book, is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So you should know Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and you should know the 5 steps that people, according to Kubler-Ross, move through toward death. And they are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And let's talk about them. So here's the graph of that. But denial is basically shock. You find out that you have a terminal illness, and well, I want to get a second opinion. Of course, feel free to get a second opinion, and you get a second opinion, and it's like, yeah, you have four weeks to live. Oh, that can't be right. I'm young. I eat healthy. Why am I going to die? This isn't right. Denial. Anger is the second one. That's the emotion that goes along with it, finding out you're going to die. Why does it have to be me? Other people could die. It doesn't have to be me. You physically get angry at everything. You might even get angry at yourself. You might get angry at your family. You get angry at your doctors. Bargaining. This is where you try to gain back more time. And you think because you will give something you have up that you'll get more time. So you say to the doctor, I will give all my money to research if I can just make it to my son's graduation. I'm just asking. You said I have a month to live. I need to live 6 months. Whatever you do, I will give you whatever you want. Or you make a deal with God. God, please, I can't die. What is my family going to do without me? I can't have this happen. Bargaining. Depression. When realize that there's nothing you can do. It's not going away. And you may not want to do anything. You don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to listen to anyone. It's just let you be. And then acceptance. that self-reliance. I understand I'm going to die, and I'm going to die on my terms. Knowing what I lived, looking back on my life, being aware of others, having the opportunity to say goodbye to other loved ones that we have, to um, deal with issues that maybe we put off for a long time. So the pros for Kubler-Ross, again, one of the first people to look at how people approach their death. And I mean, this goes back, her book first came out when I was in undergrad. So we're talking about 48 years ago. And it was, I had an entire class, a 6-week class on Kubler-Ross's Death and Dying. So it was definitely the first and very thorough. It really was nothing like that out there. So people didn't talk about death. They didn't talk about practices and what happens and how people feel. It was always just kind of put under the rug. The cons to her theory, and there are a few. One, if you don't know you're dying, you can't go through these stages, right? So if you have cancer, but you don't know you have cancer and you're going to die, there are no stages to go through because you don't know, you're not aware. And sometimes prognosis isn't certain. Things can happen. You know, someone has cancer, but that, you know, let's say they have leukemia but they can have a bone marrow transplant. And the opportunity for them to get better or extend their life is there. So it doesn't mean that they're going to die. Stages, how long? How long's a stage? You know, does this happen very quickly? Is it over days, weeks, months, years? The anxiety levels aren't included, so you don't include anything that somebody might be anxious about dying, including family members. And there are some people that yearn for death rather than anger or depression. They just want to get it over with, especially older people who have done a lot of suffering will say, you know, I'm okay. Let's just get it over with. I'm not angry. I lived my life. I just don't want any other means to keep me alive. So a DNR, do not resuscitate. Do not. There would also, you know, there are different components of this, but things, you know, don't do any extremely or extraordinary measures to keep someone alive. Usually, if you go into a hospital, they ask if you have a living will or if you have a DNR signed. Um, it always depends on the person's quality of life. Will medical improvement and something that's come along, or a particular treatment or a particular drug, could it help them or maybe diminish that life or lack of that? Um, it determines who's going to make the decision. So, you know, a living will, a durable power of attorney. You should have a durable power of attorney, especially when you're older. Who's going to make those decisions? You know, if it's a husband or a wife, you know, usually it's the husband or the wife. Sometimes, if you heard of the Karen Ann Quinlan case, she was on a ventilator for years, and her parents and her husband fought, actually had to go to court to see. They wanted to keep her on the ventilator. The husband wanted to take her off and let her pass peacefully. And the judge ruled that the husband was the one who got the final say, and he took her off the ventilator. And believe it or not, she lived for a couple days without the ventilator, and then she passed. But if you have a living will, that's already decided. So, there are living wills that go through, it's a legal document, and I actually have one included on this PowerPoint so you can see them. A healthcare proxy who makes decisions for you, and again, the durable power of attorney, the person who has the final say, the final control. They also can control all of your assets, etc. So here's an example of a living will. And I'll let you read it on your own, and it pretty much, I don't want cardiac resuscitation. I don't want mechanical respiration. I don't want a feeding tube. I don't want antibiotics, but I do want maximum pain relief, even if it may hasten my death. And I mention that because, um, if someone's in pain and they're receiving morphine, and typically it's given over 4 hours. But after 3.5 hours, you're suffering. So the doctor says, okay, we're going to give the morphine every 3 hours. And that goes on for a while. But then the pain comes back in like 2.5 hours. So the doctor writes another script to give morphine for every 2 hours. Eventually, the morphine is going to kill the person. And again, we call that passive euthanasia. They're not trying to kill the person, they're just trying to save them from being in pain. The medicine will kill them if you're giving it that often. We all know it's going to happen, but nobody wants their loved ones to be in pain. So if everything's written out, that's that legal document, and the hospital should have a copy of that document. So assisted suicide versus euthanasia. Assisted suicide is the taking of your life. Jack Kevorkian was probably the famous doctor who many of you may have or may not have heard of, since it's been so long ago, where he would travel to different parts of the country aiding people to end their life who had made the choice that they wanted to end their life. Passive versus active euthanasia. Again, passive euthanasia, I just talked about giving more meds in order to relieve pain, and then the person passes, versus voluntary active euthanasia, where someone injects you with something to cause you to die, or someone puts a pillow over your face and smothers you to die, or you're in a state that permits you to end your own life. So like Oregon is one. There are more other countries around the world too, but Oregon was the first to really do it. And you have to have less than a year to live. You have to have two doctors that confirm that you're going to die because of your illness within a year. You have to have a psych evaluation, and a psychologist or a psychiatrist has to state medically that you are of sound mind. And what will happen is your doctor will give you a script for an overdose of barbiturates. You go to the pharmacy, you pick up the barbiturates, you take the barbiturates, and it ends your life. But it's legal. So insurance companies in those states actually will pay for your claim of death, whereas in other states where it's not legal, if someone commits suicide, the policy does not cover suicide. Home care versus hospice. Again, hospice can be at home or it can be in a facility. It could be in a hospital. It's people who are able to provide care for those uh, people who are dying, and to those who are family members who may need a break from dealing with a loved one who is dying. Home care versus hospitalization. Many people will prefer to stay in their home and die in their home or receive treatment in their home because they don't want to be in a cold hospital. Even though there are loving nurses and staff at the hospital, it's still a hospital. It's not your home. Family members may have a hard time dealing with it if their loved one dies at home. Some will be, great, this is where they grew up and they should be. And then others are like, I have to live in this home after they die, and I'm always going to remember that they died here. So psychologically, it's 50-50. We're going to talk about mourning and funerals. Different cultures, different traditions have different funeral rites. And the difference between uh, mourning and the experience of bereavement and grief. Mourning is just the sadness that we feel and occur because of someone's death. Funerals are for the living. The person's dead already. Any tradition, the funeral is for the living. It psychologically helps the person have some closure to what just happened. The dead person doesn't know what's going on. They don't know that you dressed them in their favorite dress and have their favorite yellow roses on top of the casket. It's for the individuals who are living. In Western society, life expectancy tends to be much longer, so mortality rates are low, and it's not as typical as in some of the other cultures where people die at 40 or 35 or way before they're 50. And sometimes it can make it harder to deal with the death of a loved one because we don't expect it to happen, even though we all know, as I said, everyone's going to die. We know that. That doesn't make it any easier when someone in your family dies. The cost, right now, I would say the minimum of a funeral and burial are about $7,000, probably closer to 10, depending if you have to buy a grave site. Even just to open the vault that they're going to put the casket in the ground. I know when my mom passed away, it was $700, and that was in 1993. And we had the burial plots. It sounds really weird, but my parents, for their wedding gift to each other, they bought two cemetery plots right next to each other as their gift. Till death do you part. But the costs have risen. Cremation is cheaper, but still quite hefty out there. And if you don't have insurance, somebody's going to be paying for that. Survivors are kind of expected to do that. Many older individuals do what they call pre-arranged funerals, where they pay for it up front and plan everything out. And basically, when they die, the children don't have to worry about any of cost. Everything's already planned out. Hey, mom or dad want to be buried in this. This is where they want to be buried. This is the type of casket they picked out. They literally have everything prepared so the family doesn't have to deal with that. And then there are social norms and customs for different nationalities and different ethnic groups, different churches, etc. Western culture and non-Western societies, the way we grieve is a little bit different. In Western culture, uh, again, we're a very individualistic culture. A lot of people prefer to grieve by themselves. They'll go to the funeral, they'll go to the wake, which is the time after the funeral that many people will like go have a luncheon or bring people into the home to talk about the person's life. Or they'll sit Shiva for the Jewish tradition, where you sit around and you talk about the loved one with other family members and uh, select group of friends. So Western culture, Eastern culture, depends on the culture. Some have very open participation, some things that are culturally acceptable, religious tradition, and the Hindu tradition, reincarnation is part of it. So death really isn't like an end. If it is at the end, then you're at nirvana. Um, you talk about Valhalla for the Vikings. I mean, there are all different types of traditional beliefs on death. Bereavement, again, is acknowledging that somebody has died who you know and how you're going to experience it. Grief itself is the emotional response. So that's the difference between bereavement and grief. Grief is the actual emotional response, just not the acknowledgement of it, but the actual emotional response to someone you love that you lost. Okay. That first stage, again, typically is shock or numbness, disbelief, denial, unless, of course, the person's been ill for years. My mom was ill on and off for 13 years. Um, it wasn't a surprise. The mourning process was different. When my father died, when I had seen him a half hour before, and we had just come from the doctor, and he was in perfect health, and a half hour later, I find out he had a massive heart attack. That was a lot harder to deal with. The grief for my dad was just extremely long in dealing with that loss. Versus my mom, I had the opportunity to prepare myself for 13 years that this was coming. Both, very important people in my life, but the way I responded had to do with how they died and when they died. There are people who have what we call complicated grief or prolonged grief disorder. And this mourning can continue uh, for months or even years. Some people never stop grieving. Depression following a death is not uh, widespread, so to the point that it's debilitating. Only about 15 to 30% show deep depression after the loss of a loved one. I'm sure you've heard of sweetheart syndrome. This is when a loved one, in a marriage or a partnership dies, and then the other partner dies within a year. Someone who was typically perfectly healthy and just dies. We call that sweetheart syndrome. Um, Remarriage is lower sometimes for those who have experienced a death right away because they don't want to go through it again. The same thing kind of happens in a different way, but with pets. People have to, a pet died that they've had for, you know, 12, 13 years, and they're like, oh, I don't want to get another pet because I'll have to deal with it again. Well, it's that same type of feeling of you've had loss, this extreme loss and depression, and you can work yourself out of this in many cases. Sometimes you need a support group to do this that can help uh, you with, especially the loneliness that you may feel. The loss of children is dreadful, just dreadful. Very hard for parents to deal with the loss of a child because nobody ever expects to outlive their child. So you're 50 and your 20-year-old gets killed with a car. You're like, they were 20. So death is always um, a hard topic. And like I said, I always bring this in at the end of the course. I mean, we talk about death because not everyone talks about death. It's the one psychology class that we talk about death because nobody actually really wants to talk about it because it's uncomfortable, but it's really, really important that we end this course, this human growth and development course, with something that is inevitable for all of us. For you, I hope long, 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 long time away. But it's how we finish this course. So let's talk about what we have coming up. So next week, next Thursday, the only thing we have is the final exam. It has like 42 multiple choice questions. The essay questions are already open on Blackboard. Please don't send them this week. Send them with the test. Or, if you can't send them in the same email, send it two separate emails, but send them the same day. You'll have, the same thing like before, as much time as you need. We'll start at 5:30 like we always start. I'll probably be on early like I usually am. So, you know, I'll probably open the test up as soon as I get online. So if I get online like 22 or 20 after and you're online already on camera, then you would be able to get the test. Also, is your paper is due that day. That's that 7-page paper. It can be more on 7 different individuals of the different age groups that are listed on your syllabus. It spells out each age group. It's all the age groups we talked about for this course. We just finished the last one, so this would be a good night to go find somebody who's of this age group and do your observation or your interview. Again, one document, 7 pages, full page, double space type, can be longer, not less. You don't have to give me their name if you don't want to. You could just say female, age 42, if you don't feel comfortable giving their name. It's easier writing the document if you're doing it as a narrative, if you use their first name. But actually, you can make up any name because I'm not going to ever meet that person. So you could say Fred if you don't want to use your father whose name is Tom. As long as you're consistent as you're writing the paper. You can do it either as a narrative, again, like a story, where you ask them all these questions and then you summarize it like you would be reading a story, or you can do it like interview questions. If you did it as an interview, this question, this was their answer. This question, this was their answer. This question, this was try to tie in stuff that we talked about in class for that age group. If you're doing observations, especially for a young baby, of course you can't interview the baby, but you can observe the baby and see if they are, grasping things or, like the palmar grasp, or they at the point that they can use the pincher grasp, or, do they have the reflex for the Moro reflex. Yeah, tie something in from class in with your interviews or your observations. There's almost no way to get this wrong. Everyone should get an A. If you follow the directions, you should get an A on this project. Plus, learn about what human development psychologists do, because that's what you're going to be for this paper. You are a developmental psychologist and you're sharing your research with the class. There's no citations involved, just 12-point font, don't, you don't typically, I don't care which style you use, New Times New Roman or Courier. That's up to you, as long as it's not like wingdings or something crazy that I'm not going to be able to read. But that is due next week. The latest I would take it would be midnight. If it comes in after midnight, you'll get a 0. So if you have it by class time, great. If it comes in after midnight, without prior talking to me, it would be a 0 because I have to do all your grades and get all those grades back to you by Monday. Any questions? You've been a remarkable class. because as people hop on next week, I might not be able to say that to the class. You've been very patient with my voice. I also appreciate that too. It made it most of tonight, except for when we had to take a break for a minute. But you've been awesome. Like I said, most people did very, very well on last week's test. My people that took the test today, you'll have your grades today. I think I sent one already, but you'll have your grade back today. And as soon as I get everyone's activities, some people, like I said, still haven't turned them in. Make sure you get them in before class on Thursday, because if they don't get in by Thursday before class, then I'm not going to give you credit. Yes, Laura.
Professor, I just had a question for well, first of all, did you receive my paper? Because I had sent it already.
If you didn't get a response, like when did you send
So
it?
probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I believe I did, but I would resend it again since I
Okay,
don't have
resend
my
it.
email open right now to look.
Okay. And then my other question is just on that toy review. I'm one of the people that didn't do it yet. Um, I'm
You
having
don't?
trouble I'm having trouble copying and pasting the pictures I'm finding of the different toys for the toy review.
Okay.
Is it okay? Is it okay to give like a website? I'm just having trouble with my computer to copy and paste the pictures.
Yeah, you shouldn't have trouble. The other option, do you have an iPhone or a smartphone?
Yeah.
You could always take a picture of the picture and send me the pictures that way,
Okay.
and just
Okay.
like drop all the pictures on a document.
Okay.
You could do it
Okay.
that way. That would, you know. Anybody else have any questions? I'll stick around at the end if you don't want to say it in front of the class. You could always put it in a PowerPoint. Oh, somebody just said that too. Yeah, you could always put it in a PowerPoint, drop the pictures and do your toy review that way also. Any other questions? Okay, everyone, you got a lot of work to do in a week. But like I said, uh, final is like 42 questions. Uh, it's heavy on the stuff on death. You know, there's some stuff on that. But if you've paid attention the last couple weeks, last 2 weeks, you should be fine for the test. I think it's actually one of the easiest out of the three, but that's always depends on the person, you know, and how much you studied. So have an awesome night. I will post the link to the video once I get it uploaded, and have a great week. See you next week.
Thank you. See you next week.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
I got a quick question.
Sure.
You said activity assignment a few minutes ago.
Hmm.
Do we have another assignment other than milestone, the toy review, and the 2 exams?
Nope, that was it.
Okay, just making sure. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and class participation. See, that's part of your assignment. So have you been here? You know, that's part of class participation.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
I checked my email and I didn't receive a score back from last week's test. Do you just want me to resend it?
Let me look. Let's see if I have it with me. I do have your score, but you can send me an email and I'll tell you what the score. I must have somehow missed replying to your email, but I'll be glad to do that. I have your score with me.
All right, thank you. Did you
Mhm.
get my open-ended ones as well?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I
perfect.
got everything and I got the score for the total score for the test. I don't, somewhere along the line, I must have missed sending it to you, but I do have it with me.
All right,
So
thank you.
I can send it, sure. Have a
Have a
good
good
night.
night.
Okay, questions?
Yeah, so I have questions about the final, like the final essay. So you want us to like introduce who the person is that we're observing and then just like tell you things about them, like things that we've seen?
If it should be either an observation that you actually watch them for like a half hour, or
Okay.
you talk to them and ask them
Okay.
questions, and
All
then you
right.
take their answers
I am
and type back
struggling
in.
to find somebody with the age range of like 3 to 6. I don't really know anybody
Yeah, I wish you would have
with
said
kids that
something
age.
before, because maybe somebody on the Zoom could have hooked you up with somebody.
I do have a cousin who's got a 5-year-old, and I did spend time with him after my aunt passed away, but
Okay.
this was like last month.
Okay, that's
So
good.
can
Well,
I just go off of that?
yep, sure
Okay, because they
can. You
don't
can,
live close.
yeah, you could also, contact the parent and say, okay, I'm writing this thing for my class. Can you add anything that maybe I didn't observe that you see happening? So
Okay.
you can use the parent in that case to get information also. But sure, yeah, you can use that.
Okay. Um, I also wanted to kind of throw out my idea and see what you think about like my child game.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, like I said, it's kind of like tag, but it's not. So it's called zombies.
Okay.
And basically, you pick one person, whether it's like rock, paper, scissor, or you draw names. And
Okay.
that person is the infected person. And they have to find and infect the other people. Now, if they grab your clothes, that doesn't count. It has to be skin to skin contact. And the game isn't over until they've found everybody. If the original zombie is tired of looking for the last few people, they can yell safe and the game will be over. And
I'm
then the
gonna I'm
first
gonna tell
person
you
to be
right
found.
now, no, that's too much closer to what's already out there. There's nothing really.
Okay.
They're not
What
learning anything new.
what
They're
game
not
exists that's like that?
tag. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, really think about that. What are they learning? What are they experiencing?
Just social skills, really.
No, it's already out there. I'm sorry. If you can
And
find a
motor
way,
skills.
if you can find a way, like if they get tagged, that they have to answer a question, or they're like, the person who did tagging, if they can't answer the question the person says, then they have to let them go. Or I mean, if you can find a way to make it different and make it some sort of learning experience, then I would say yes. But just as you got to find them and you have to get everyone, no, that doesn't really, it doesn't really teach anything new.
Okay.
Okay? But
That's why we
again,
ask. I didn't want to waste my time.
yeah, well, like I said, there are ways to adapt that to make it work, but the way it is your explanation, I would say no.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Good luck on the zombie game.
Thanks.
Anything else?
No.
You have an awesome week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.